The man you're looking at is 61-year-old Gary Michael Hilton. Gary is a serial killer. We'll dive deep into the psychological makeup of the man known as the National Forest serial killer. We'll also walk through each of his crimes and explain exactly how he was eventually caught. One of the most striking aspects of this case is the vast amount of audio and video content available in the public domain. This material doesn't just document the timeline of events. It also gives us a rare look into Gary's mental state throughout his criminal career. In fact, some of the footage was recorded by Gary himself. On January 1, 2008, Meredith Emerson decided to take her dog, Ella, for a hike in the North Georgia mountains. At home, she left a message on a chalkboard for her roommate Julia, who was still sleeping after New Year's Eve celebrations. The note read, "Taking Ella hiking. Hope you had fun, smiley face." Julia went on to have a normal New Year's Day, only becoming concerned the following morning when Meredith still hadn't returned home. While at work, she was informed that Meredith had missed her shift, something completely out of character for someone as punctual and responsible as Meredith. Julia then called 911 and reported her missing. After work, Julia and some friends took matters into their own hands and began searching. Their first lead came when they discovered Meredith's vehicle at the base of Blood Mountain, covered in snow. Blood Mountain sits within the Chattahoochee National Forest and is one of the most popular hiking spots in the southeastern United States, located along the Appalachian Trail. They spent the rest of the day walking the trail, hoping to find any sign of Meredith, but she was nowhere to be found. The next morning, deputies from the local sheriff's office joined the search. As the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, also known as the GBI, intensified the search efforts, emotions began to run high among those close to Meredith. Let me tell you something. Concerning items were found along the trail. Among them were Ella's leash, Meredith's water bottles, and even a police-issued expandable bat. Even more alarming was that all of these items were recovered from an area where the ground appeared disturbed, suggesting a struggle had taken place. With these discoveries, the situation escalated quickly. Around 19 different police agencies joined forces to aid in the search. Within just a few days, investigators began receiving multiple tips from people who claimed to have seen a strange man following Meredith along the trail. Now, the search had gained national media attention. Gwinnett County teams and volunteers lined up to help. Authorities issued a description of the person of interest, a 60-year-old white man, around 5 feet 10 inches, weighing about 160 pounds, with silver gray hair. He was possibly driving a white minivan and had a reddish-colored dog that answered to the name Dandy. Perhaps the most chilling detail was that this man had been seen carrying a police baton and a bayonet-style knife on his belt. This bolo, be on the lookout, alert led to several strong leads, including one from a defense attorney named Sam Rail. He recognized the suspect as a former client, Gary Hilton. Hilton had a long criminal history, primarily made up of misdemeanors like marijuana possession and theft. However, his record also included more serious charges, such as arson and assault. Months before Meredith's disappearance, back in October of 2007, Gary was confronted by a police officer after trespassing on private property. Officer Gary was technically free to go, but due to his transient lifestyle, he frequently crossed paths with law enforcement. These encounters occasionally led to criminal charges. That's where Sam came into the picture. Over the years, Sam represented Gary in multiple legal matters, and through these interactions, a light-hearted friendship formed between them. In 1995, Sam decided he wanted to produce a horror film. He teamed up with Gary to co-write the script. They eventually landed on a premise where, as Gary described it, a serial killer would lure beautiful women into the woods and then pursue them. Gary envisioned the killer as a man named John Tabor. Gary had worked for John, initially as a telemarketer and later as a contractor in his home siding business. Their professional relationship spanned roughly a decade, from 1997 to September 2007. The business was known as Insulated Wall Systems, and Gary was fond of calling himself Mac the Siding Guy. During this time, Gary lived at the company's premises located at 4169 Claremont Road in Chamblee, Georgia, a property owned by John. When asked about his relationship with Gary Hilton, John recounted, "I first met Gary around 10 years ago when he responded to a help-wanted ad we had placed for a telemarketing job. He had prior experience in the same field and interviewed at our office. We hired him shortly after. He came in, did his work, and there wasn't much else to say at first." John also provided crucial insights into Gary's personality and lifestyle. He noted that Gary was deeply passionate about the wilderness and frequently spent long periods on the Appalachian Trail, including time around Blood Mountain. Gary traveled with a large, reddish-furred dog named Dandy, whom he referred to as his only family. He was rarely seen without the dog and even carried a collapsible police baton for protection. He was unconventional, John described. "When I met him, he was a 50-year-old man who said he had no family besides his dog. He only worked or lived in places where he could stay with the dog. They were never apart." Eventually, Gary and Sam chose a chilling title for their film, Deadly Run. "I've always been a dog lover. I've known dogs all my life." John begins, his voice tinged with a reluctant nostalgia. "So, I sympathized with Gary. I understood what it meant when he said his dog was his only family. John did what he could. He made accommodations so that Gary could bring his dog, Dandy, to work. It wasn't a typical office arrangement, but Gary wasn't a typical man. He showed up, he did the job, and for the first few years, I don't recall any problems at all. But even then, there were signs. Gary wasn't like everyone else. He was talkative on the phone, sure, but face-to-face, especially with strangers, there was this discomfort, this tension. He was awkward, a loner. He didn't like being around people much." While working for John, Gary would often tell stories, odd, unsettling stories, about confrontations he claimed to have had while walking Dandy. In every version of the tale, it was Dandy who clashed with another dog, and Gary who ended up the victim, physically assaulted by angry dog owners. Whether these events truly happened, or were just fragments of Gary's imagination, no one could say for sure. But it was the last year, when everything began to change. About a year ago, John recalls, he just stopped working. He became withdrawn, harder to talk to. He still needed money. Wanted it, really, and I tried to help. But by summer, it had gotten worse. Much worse. Gary was no longer asking. He was demanding. He told me he needed $10,000. John says, the memory's still sharp. Just like that. No explanation. No room for negotiation. He said, "I don't care how you get it, but you better give it." What began as a quiet life with a man and his dog was now unraveling into something darker, something dangerous, something no one had seen coming. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You either give me half now, or you'll pay the price." What started as subtle manipulation quickly spiraled into something darker, something dangerous. He insisted it would be the easy thing to do, but the implication was clear. If there was no money, there would be consequences. As summer wore on, the threats became bolder, more direct, until finally, he snapped. He told me flat out, "Give me $10,000 within hours, or I'll kill you." It was that very threat that pushed John to contact the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And just minutes after the GBI got involved, Gary made his move. From a huddle house in Marble Hill, Georgia, he made a call, a demand. He wanted money now. But what Gary didn't know was that law enforcement was already on his trail. They traced the call back to the diner. Within minutes, the place was swarming with police. But when they got there, Gary Hilton had vanished. No sign, no trace, just gone. Investigators turned to the Department of Driver Services, pulling Hilton's driver's license photo. That image was shared with hikers near Blood Mountain, the last place Meredith Emerson had been seen. The reaction was instant. "That's him," they said. "That's the man we saw with Meredith." 3 days after Meredith disappeared, on January 4th, 2008. A strange call came in from a Kroger grocery store, 50 miles south of Blood Mountain. A black Labrador had wandered into the store. Could it be? Officers scanned for a microchip, and it was her. Ella, Meredith's dog, found alive. For the first time since the nightmare began, there was a spark of hope. We are thankful that Ella has been found, but Meredith is still out there. The family issued a heartfelt plea to the public, begging anyone with even the smallest memory, the faintest clue, to come forward. And just hours later, the tip line rang again. Another woman, another call, another threat. Gary called me, she said, out of nowhere, AF. Just across the street from the Kroger where Meredith's dog Ella had been found, stood a Quick Trip gas station. That's where Gary Hilton had made the chilling phone call to another woman, threatening her just as he had John. By the time officers arrived, the gas station was quiet. No Gary, no sign of where he'd gone, but something urged them to look closer. Behind the Quick Trip, tucked away near the edge of the lot, was a dumpster, and inside it a nightmare. Officers discovered Meredith's personal belongings, the very items she'd taken on her final hike. Her clothes, her gloves, her wallet, with her driver's license still inside. Each item was soaked in blood. And then, a pair of men's boots. Bloodstained. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was a crime scene. As investigators worked to process what they'd found, a call came into the DeKalb County Police Dispatch. It would change everything. 911 dispatcher. DeKalb 911. What's your emergency? Caller, voice trembling. Okay. I have the person of interest in that missing woman case. He's here, at the Chevron on Ashford Dunwoody. Dispatcher, the van is there? Caller, the van is here. The dog is that red dog. I saw his face. I've been watching the news. I know it's him. The caller was breathless, watching Gary Hilton in real time. He's dumping stuff? Pillows, a blanket, a sleeping bag. He's just throwing it out, trashing everything. He looks guilty, like he knows what he's done. And then, wait, here they come. The cops. They're here. Oh my God, they're getting out. They've got him now. Sound of sirens. Officers shouting. Gary Michael Hilton was taken into custody. Just days after Meredith Emerson vanished, the man at the center of it all was finally cornered. The question now wasn't who. It was what had he done, and why. After his arrest, Gary Hilton was transported immediately to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation headquarters. But any hope of a breakthrough in questioning was quickly dashed. He was uncooperative from the very first step, dragging his feet, literally, as he was escorted into the building. And then, in what could only be described as deliberate defiance, he laid flat on the floor, staring blankly into space, saying nothing. The silence was broken only once. No statements. I'm waiving no rights. I want an attorney appointed to represent me. I want to speak with that attorney, and I want that attorney present. The detectives had seen this kind of act before, but this wasn't a performance. This was a man with something to hide. But even in silence, his body told a different story. Scratches, deep, curved, ran across his face and neck, what looked unmistakably like defensive wounds. His hand, swollen, badly, possibly injured in a struggle. While Gary refused to speak, the evidence around him was starting to do the talking. That same night, investigators made a chilling discovery inside his van. A camera, still functioning, still loaded with footage. Inside, a collection of homemade videos, bizarre, rambling, and deeply unsettling. Look, I'm taking a picture while D comes, for immortality, right there. In one clip, Gary flexes in front of the camera, his dog Dandy loyally beside him. I've gained 20 pounds in 3, maybe 4 months. 171 pounds now. We gotta document it. These weren't the words of a man unraveling. They were the musings of someone who believed he was starring in his own show. But beneath the strange bravado, there was a pattern. Several videos showed heated arguments between Gary and police after he was caught trespassing on private property. You're the law, man? I'm gonna check it out. If it ain't the law and you're wrong, you come. I'm not talking to nobody. I'm Fallon and I'm suing. Then, another bizarre encounter, this time at Papa John's. You tell these guys to quit terror driving, not 5 miles over the limit. You tell them, or I will. More than 100 videos were found, each one a puzzle piece. A glimpse into the mind of a man who believed the world owed him something. A man spiraling into chaos, while recording every moment of it. And still, Meredith was missing. As investigators sifted through Gary Hilton's van, more evidence surfaced. Evidence that left no doubt. Blood spattered throughout the vehicle. Tests confirmed what everyone feared. It matched Meredith Emerson's DNA. With mounting pressure and overwhelming proof, Gary Hilton was formally charged with kidnapping with bodily harm. The next step, court-appointed legal representation. A public defender stepped in, and soon after, The prosecution offered a deal. If Gary led investigators to Meredith's body, the death penalty would be taken off the table. The very next afternoon, the phone rang. Gary's ready to talk. Inside the interrogation room, detectives laid it out plainly. Detective, calm, careful. What I'd like to do is let you tell us where the body is. Help us find her. Gary agreed, and with eerie calm, he began to draw a crude map leading to a remote part of the Dawson Forest Wildlife Management Area, about 50 miles southwest of Blood Mountain. You'll go down that road about 50 yards, then off to the left, south side of the road. The body is there, about 40 yards in, covered in leaves and brush, not buried. Then came the harder questions. Detective, is it wrapped in anything? Gary, no. Detective, is it clothed? Gary, quietly, no, it isn't. Detective hesitantly, is it intact? A pause. Then, Gary, no, it isn't. The head is missing. And then, justification, cold, calculated. The only reason, by the way, the head was removed was forensically. He claimed the hair would have been full of fiber evidence. He wanted to erase every trace, to control the narrative, to stay one step ahead. The only reason the body is nude is forensics. I didn't even know I was a suspect. Not then. I only found out later, that same day, at a gas station. The words fell flat. Empty. The damage had been done. Meredith Emerson was gone. And now, finally, the truth had come to the surface. Brutal, clinical, and heartbreaking. Interrogator, gently, on the front page. Where would the head be? Gary Hilton. It's gonna be a little harder to find. You'll need a dog for this. Detective, can you help us? Gary, quietly, I'll help. I'm sorry. To both of you. I know it's been trying. These cases are emotionally wrenched. For you. But that's your job. Using Gary's directions, investigators returned to the thick woods of Dawson Forest. And there, they found her. Meredith Emerson's body. Her head. Her bloodied clothing. The recovery was devastating, but it brought some measure of closure. An autopsy was performed the next morning. The cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head, delivered before her head was removed post-mortem. As detectives drove Gary back to GBI headquarters, he talked, quietly, flatly, as if recalling an errand, not a murder. There was never any plan to let her go, he admitted. I knew if I let her go, I'd be ID'd instantly. He claimed he chose Meredith not at random, but deliberately. It's easier to establish control over a female. How did I start a conversation with her? Dogs, he said. People with dogs. Their dogs always meet first. Gary had waited, hiding in the bushes, watching her. He knew the trail would eventually loop, knew she'd turn back, and when she did, he struck. She fought, he said. She was trained. Martial arts. I read that in the paper. 120-pound girl. Damn near whipped me. He sounded almost impressed. I had to handfight her. Still couldn't get control. She'd pretend I was in charge, then fight again. Eventually, he overpowered her. He shoved her into the back of his van, locked the doors, and drove off. In the days following Meredith's disappearance, Gary Hilton was seen across North Georgia, attempting to withdraw money using her debit card. At each ATM, he concealed his face, likely trying to avoid detection while hoping to drain her bank account before authorities were alerted. But what Gary didn't count on was Meredith's courage. She gave me several false PIN numbers, he later admitted. 4, maybe 5 times. Each time I tried, she kept insisting it would work. She tricked me, he said bitterly. I kept going back, like an idiot. It never worked. None of it. Meredith's resistance came at a cost. Between each failed attempt, Gary assaulted her, punishing her for defying him, for delaying the inevitable. Eventually, he gave up, and what happened next was beyond chilling. Gary drove to a remote section of the forest, deep in isolation. He restrained Meredith there, chained her to a tree. He told her he'd be back soon, that she'd be released in just a few minutes. But it was a lie. He returned to his campsite, made a cup of coffee, and retrieved the weapon, a handle from a car jack. Then he walked back into the woods. I gave her a book to read, set everything up, he said. I walked up, pretending I was going to unlock the chain. And then I struck her with the bar. Detective off camera. What kind of bar? Gary, a jack handle. Just a straight jack handle. Afterward, Gary's actions became calculated, clinical. I wanted everything exposed to the elements. Didn't want to hold anything back. I poured liquid bleach over her. Any DNA she might have picked up from my clothes. She'd been wearing them for 3 days. When asked if it was difficult to take Meredith's life, Gary's response was cold, disturbing. It was like an out-of-body experience. Surrealistic. Of course it was. Removing a head. It's unreal. Unreal. Shortly after Meredith's body was recovered, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation held a press conference. At approximately 7:30 this evening, the body of Meredith Emerson was discovered in a wooded area. The nation grieved. And for those who had followed every second of the search, the nightmare had come to its devastating conclusion. With the recovery of Meredith Emerson's body and Gary Hilton's cooperation, charges were swiftly amended. He was no longer just a person of interest. He was now officially charged with murder. Gary agreed to plead guilty, and in doing so, he opened the door for detectives to dig deeper into his psyche. The following interview would stretch for 4.5 hours. What emerged was a chilling self-diagnosis from the killer himself. Gary Hilton, on tape, "I'm a sociopath, man. That's what they call it now, antisocial personality disorder. In my day, it was called sociopathic character disorder. I present this fantastical spectacle to people. I know they can't understand it, because it's so fantastical." What Gary offered next was more than just a metaphor. It was a twisted attempt to mythologize his own evil. It's like the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger would come galloping into town, this masked man in a tight outfit, shiny guns, dramatic. And when he left, the townspeople would always say, "Who was that man? That's what I do to society." He smiled as he said it. A performance, a story. He wanted to be remembered not just as a killer, but as an enigma. They can't wrap their heads around it, he claimed. And people ask me all the time, "How come you seem so intelligent? So well-read?" "And you know what? That's very perceptive of you," he told the detective. "The reason I seem intelligent is because I, alone, have time to stop and think." "You don't have that time," he said. "You're too busy." The words were arrogant, detached, haunting. This wasn't just a confession, it was a monologue. One final attempt to control the narrative, to paint himself as something more than just a murderer.